The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 in the morning, but Daniel Reyes was already awake, staring at the ceiling of his modest bedroom, his calloused hands folded behind his head as he ran through the day's checklist for what felt like the 100th time. Sofia's 10th birthday party today had to be perfect. It had to be everything she deserved, even if his wallet couldn't stretch as far as his heart wanted it to. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sofia, who was sleeping peacefully in the room next door. Her dark hair splayed across the pillow that still held the faint scent of the lavender spray Elena used to make before everything changed. Before cancer stole away the music teacher who had filled their small house with laughter and melodies, leaving behind only echoes and a 10-year-old girl who sang her mother's songs when she thought no one was listening. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen was bathed in the soft glow of the overhead light as Daniel pulled out bags of balloons he had bought 3 for the price of 1 at the discount store, his fingers working methodically to blow up each one manually because an electric pump was just another expense he couldn't justify, not when Sofia needed new school shoes and the car registration was due next month. Each balloon took longer than it should, his lungs burning slightly, but he kept going, red, blue, yellow, green, creating a rainbow of color that would transform their modest backyard into something magical. Mrs. Delgado arrived at 6:30, carrying a covered cake tin and wearing the warm smile that had become Daniel's lifeline over the past 3 years since Elena passed. She let herself in through the back door, the way she always did, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, her brown eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that made Sofia giggle. "Mijo," she said, setting the cake pan on the counter. "You've been up all night, haven't you?" Daniel managed a tired smile as he twisted another balloon closed. "Guilty as charged, Mrs. D, but today has to be special. You know how the other kids at school are? Their parties are always so—" She held up a weathered hand, stopping him mid-sentence before he could spiral into the familiar worry that had been gnawing at him for weeks. "Daniel Reyes, you listen to me right now. That little girl upstairs doesn't need a country club or a pony or whatever nonsense those other parents throw money at. She needs her papa's love, and that's something you give her every single day." Together, they worked in comfortable silence, stringing paper garlands across the kitchen doorway and arranging mismatched chairs around the small dining table that Daniel had borrowed from 3 different neighbors. The morning sun began to filter through the windows, casting warm, golden light across their preparations, making even the dollar store decorations look festive and bright. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway made them both look up as Sofia appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes wide with excitement, her hair sticking up in directions that defied gravity. She wore her favorite purple pajamas, the ones with tiny music notes scattered across the fabric, a gift from Elena during her last Christmas. "Daddy," she breathed, taking in the transformed kitchen. "It looks like a fairy tale." Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion as he knelt down to her level, sweeping her into a hug that smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "Happy birthday, mi amor," he whispered against her hair. 10 years old, can you believe it?" Sofia pulled back, her face glowing with the kind of pure joy that made all the sleepless nights and double shifts at the auto repair shop worth every moment. But her eyes held something else too, a flickering awareness that made Daniel's stomach clench with worry. She had heard the other kids talking about their elaborate parties, the rented bouncy castles and magicians and catered lunches that cost more than Daniel made in a week. "I can't wait for everyone to see what we made together," she said, her voice carrying a determination that reminded Daniel so much of Elena, it took his breath away. "Especially the surprise I've been working on." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Surprise? What surprise?" Sofia giggled, pressing a finger to her lips. "That's what makes it a surprise, Daddy, but it's going to be the best part of the whole party, I promise." Mrs. Delgado caught Daniel's eye over Sofia's head and winked knowingly. "That girl has been sneaking around like a little spy for weeks now, hiding something in her room, but she won't tell me what it is." As Sofia skipped back upstairs to get dressed, Daniel felt a familiar knot of anxiety settle in his chest. He wanted so desperately to give her everything, to be the father who never had to say no to field trips or name-brand clothes or birthday parties that would make her friends envious. but all he had was love and hope and the determination to make this day memorable for all the right reasons. By 7:30, the backyard was transformed. String lights hung between the two oak trees, casting a warm glow over the small space. Folding tables covered with checkered cloths held trays of sandwiches cut into triangle shapes and a bowl of fruit salad that Mrs. Delgado had insisted on making. The piñata, a slightly lopsided unicorn that Daniel had found at the thrift store, hung from the lower branch of the biggest tree, swaying gently in the morning breeze. The old speaker system that Daniel had repaired the night before using spare parts from the shop sat ready on the back porch, connected to Sofia's mother's old phone that would play the carefully curated playlist of songs Elena used to sing around the house. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and as the first car pulled into the driveway, Daniel took a deep breath and prepared to face whatever judgment the day might bring.
The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the quiet suburban morning as the first guests began to arrive. Daniel smoothed down his shirt one final time, a button-down he had pressed twice to make sure every crease was perfect, and walked toward the front yard with Sofia bouncing beside him, her excitement radiating like sunshine despite the knot of nervousness that had been growing in his chest since dawn. The Morales family came first, their modest sedan pulling up to the curb as 8-year-old Isabella tumbled out, wearing a bright yellow dress and clutching a wrapped present. Mrs. Morales waved warmly at Daniel, her face genuine and kind as she approached the front gate. "Daniel, this looks absolutely lovely," she said, taking in the string lights and balloons that decorated the front porch. "You've outdone yourself." The compliment settled some of Daniel's nerves. As more children began arriving, each one greeted with Sofia's infectious enthusiasm as she hugged her classmates and ushered them toward the backyard. But as the minutes ticked by, the cars pulling up to the house grew larger, shinier, more expensive, and the parents who emerged from them carried themselves with the polished confidence that came from never having to check their bank balance before buying groceries. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, and Daniel felt his stomach drop as Claudia Harper stepped out, wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and her white linen outfit looked like it had been ironed by professionals. She surveyed the modest house and yard with the calculating gaze of someone appraising real estate. Behind her emerged Ethan, a quiet boy with sandy brown hair who always seemed to hover at the edges of group activities at school. His expensive clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his eyes darted nervously between his mother and the other children who were already running around in the backyard. Claudia approached Daniel with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her heels clicking against the sidewalk as she extended a manicured hand. "Daniel," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that felt somehow dangerous. "This is so quaint. You've really made the most of your space, haven't you?" The word quaint landed like a small slap, but Daniel forced a smile and shook her hand firmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper. Sofia has been looking forward to this for weeks." "Oh, I'm sure she has," Claudia replied, her gaze sweeping over the handmade decorations and borrowed furniture. "It reminds me of the community fundraisers we used to have when I was growing up. So nostalgic." More parents filtered in behind her, each one politely commenting on the decorations while their eyes cataloged every detail with the precision of auditors. Daniel noticed the way they clustered together near the back fence, their voices low as they surveyed the modest spread of homemade snacks and dollar store party favors. Sofia seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of judgment, as she grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the group of children who were already investigating the piñata. "Come on, Ethan," she said brightly. "Wait until you see what my dad and I made for lunch. We have sandwiches and fruit, and Mrs. Delgado made the most amazing cake." Ethan's face lit up with the first genuine smile Daniel had seen from him, his shyness melting away in the face of Sofia's warmth. "It sounds perfect," he said quietly, and Daniel felt a surge of gratitude toward the boy who seemed to genuinely appreciate his daughter's excitement. But the warm moment was interrupted by a burst of laughter from the group of parents clustered near the refreshment table. Daniel couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, the kind of laughter that came at someone else's expense. His jaw tightened as he forced himself to focus on the children who were having a wonderful time despite their parents' obvious disapproval. Mrs. Delgado appeared at his elbow, carrying a pitcher of fresh lemonade, her eyes blazing with protective fury as she glared at the whispering parents. "Those people," she muttered under her breath, "need to remember that children can hear everything and feel everything too." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her arm, trying to project calm, even as his own temper simmered just below the surface. "It's okay, Mrs. D. Let them talk. Sofia is happy, and that's all that matters." But even as he said the words, Daniel felt a familiar shame creeping up his spine, the same shame that hit him every time he had to tell Sofia they couldn't afford something she wanted. Every time he packed her lunch in a brown paper bag while her classmates carried insulated lunchboxes with cartoon characters. Every time he dropped her off at school in his paint-chipped pickup truck while other parents drove luxury SUVs. He glanced toward Sofia, who was organizing a game of tag with her friends, her face glowing with joy and leadership. But he caught the moment when her smile faltered slightly as she overheard one of the parents make a comment about the humble decorations, and Daniel's heart clenched with the knowledge that her daughter was learning too young that love and effort weren't always enough to shield her from the world's harsh judgments. The late morning sun cast dappled shadows across the backyard as the party settled into its rhythm, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, evaluated, and found wanting. The group of parents had gravitated toward the far corner of the yard, where they stood in a loose circle, their voices carefully modulated to sound like casual conversation, but their eyes constantly scanning the modest decorations and homemade refreshments. Daniel busied himself arranging napkins and checking the cooler of drinks, trying to appear occupied while straining to catch fragments of their conversation. But the words that drifted his way hit him like physical blows. "I mean, it's sweet," Claudia's voice carried clearly across the yard, despite her attempt at discretion. "But you have to feel sorry for Sofia, growing up like this. She'll remember this is her humble beginnings when she's older." Another parent chimed in with false sympathy. "It must be so hard for Daniel, managing everything on his own. I heard he works at that little auto shop on Maple Street. Can't be bringing in much." "The elephant in the room," one of the fathers added with a chuckle, "is wondering how he's going to afford private school when Sofia gets older, assuming he even has college savings started." Daniel's hands clenched into fists as he pretended to adjust the tablecloth, but the comments kept coming, each one wrapped in the veneer of concern, but dripping with condescension. "Remember Ethan's party last month?" Claudia continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing valuable wisdom. "The country club, the catered lunch, the magic show, those are the kinds of memories that really matter, the ones that show children what success looks like." Mrs. Delgado appeared at Daniel's side, her weathered face flushed with indignation, her eyes blazing as she stared down the group of gossiping parents with the ferocity of a grandmother defending her cubs. "Excuse me," she said, her voice loud enough to carry across the yard, "but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation, and I think you might be confused about what really matters." The group fell silent, their faces turning toward Mrs. Delgado with expressions ranging from embarrassment to annoyance. Claudia recovered first, her media-trained smile sliding back into place. "Oh, Mrs. Delgado, we were just chatting about how lovely the party is. So creative." Mrs. Delgado stepped forward, her chin raised with the dignity of someone who had lived through real hardship and knew the difference between genuine struggle and manufactured drama. "Let me tell you something about this man," she said, pointing toward Daniel. "He works 16-hour days to make sure that little girl has everything she needs. He teaches her to sing the songs her mother loved. He helps with homework every night after working on cars all day. And he does it all with more grace and love than most people manage with 10 times the resources." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, pausing in their games to look toward the adults with worried expressions. Daniel felt his face burning with embarrassment, not at Mrs. Delgado's defense, but at the fact that Sofia was witnessing this moment of public humiliation. Sofia had indeed noticed the tension.
her bright smile fading as she looked between the cluster of parents and her father's rigid posture. She approached slowly, her steps hesitant as she tried to read the adult emotion swirling around her. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Why is everyone so quiet?" Claudia seized the opportunity to regain control of the narrative, bending down to Sofia's level with exaggerated warmth. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. We were just telling your father how impressed we are with everything he's accomplished here. It takes real creativity to throw a party like this." But Sofia was too perceptive to be fooled by Claudia's patronizing tone. Her dark eyes moved between the adults, searching for the truth behind their carefully constructed smiles. And Daniel watched his daughter's innocence chip away piece by piece as she began to understand that the adults were not celebrating her party, but pitying it. "I'm going to go get ready for the surprise," she said, quietly, her usual enthusiasm dampened by the weight of adult judgment. As Sofia disappeared into the house, Daniel felt something shift inside him, a protective fury that burned away his embarrassment and shame. These people had come to his home, eaten his food, and now they were teaching his daughter that love could be measured in dollars and cents, that effort without expensive results was somehow lesser than effortless wealth. He straightened his shoulders and walked toward the group of parents, his voice steady despite the anger coursing through his veins. "I appreciate everyone coming today," he said, meeting each set of eyes with unwavering directness. "Sofia has been looking forward to sharing this day with her friends, and I hope the children are having as much fun as she is." The message was clear and unmistakable. This was his home, his daughter's day, and their judgment was neither welcome nor important. But as the parents shifted uncomfortably and mumbled responses, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was yet to come. The tension in the backyard was thicker than a knife, but Daniel refused to let the judgmental whispers of adults ruin his daughter's special day. He clapped his hands together with forced enthusiasm, drawing the children's attention away from their parents' uncomfortable shuffling. "All right, everyone," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Who's ready for some games?" The children erupted in cheers, their excitement genuine and infectious, as they abandoned their exploration of the yard to gather around Daniel. Even Ethan, who had been hovering uncertainly near his mother, stepped forward with a shy smile, his eyes lighting up at the prospect of organized fun. Sofia bounced on her toes beside her father, her earlier worry forgotten in the face of game time. Her enthusiasm was contagious as she helped Daniel explain the rules for their first activity, a classic sack race using burlap bags that Daniel had gotten for free from the feed store where he sometimes did repair work. The children lined up at the makeshift starting line, their giggles and chatter filling the air with the kind of pure joy that only comes from simple pleasures, unburdened by adult concerns about cost or appearances. Daniel handed out the scratchy burlap sacks, watching as each child wriggled inside with varying degrees of success. "Ready, set, go!" he shouted, and chaos erupted in the best possible way. Children hopped forward in their sacks, some moving with surprising grace, while others tumbled over immediately, dissolving into fits of laughter that rolled across the grass like waves. Sofia moved with the confident coordination of someone who had been practicing in secret, her dark hair streaming behind her as she hopped toward the finish line. Behind the children, the parents watched with expressions that ranged from genuine amusement to thinly veiled disdain. Claudia caught Daniel's eye roll as Sofia took the lead, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her designer purse, as if she were timing how long she had to endure this quaint display of budget entertainment. Ethan surprised everyone, including himself, by finishing second, his quiet victory dance making Sofia cheer even louder as she threw her arms around him in celebration. "You were amazing!" she exclaimed, her face glowing with the generous spirit that made Daniel's chest swell with pride. "I could never hop that fast when I first tried." The genuine friendship between the children created a stark contrast to the adult dynamics playing out in the background, where Claudia had moved closer to another mother to share what looked like pointed commentary about the games. I remember Ethan's party last month, Claudia's voice carried, despite her attempt at discretion. The entertainment coordinator from that exclusive children's agency was absolutely divine. They had those professional magicians and the pony rides, of course. This is sweet, too, in its own way. Daniel gritted his teeth but kept his focus on the children as he set up the next game, musical chairs, using the mismatched, borrowed furniture and his carefully repaired speaker system. The music crackled slightly through the old speakers, but the children didn't care. They danced around the chairs with abandon, their movements silly and free. When the music stopped, the scramble for seats was fierce but good-natured. Even the children who were eliminated cheered for their friends rather than sulking about losing. Sofia made sure to high-five each eliminated player, keeping the mood light and inclusive. More parents arrived fashionably late as the games continued, each new arrival requiring a moment to process the humble setting before arranging their faces into polite masks of appreciation. Daniel noticed the way conversations died when he approached, how voices dropped to whispers when they thought he was out of earshot. The piñata was next, the slightly lopsided unicorn that Daniel had found at the thrift store and painstakingly repaired with duct tape and fresh tissue paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was colorful and sturdy, and when the first child took a swing at it, the candy explosion that followed sent everyone scrambling with delighted shrieks. Even some of the parents smiled genuinely at the children's joy, their protective instincts overriding their social judgments as they watched their kids dive for scattered candy. But the moment of unity was brief, quickly dissolving back into segregated clusters as the adults resumed their whispered assessments. Sofia moved through the games like a natural hostess, making sure everyone felt included, checking on quieter children, and celebrating each small victory with genuine enthusiasm. But Daniel noticed the way her eyes occasionally flicked toward the adult conversations, the way her smile faltered for a moment when she caught snippets of condescending commentary. During a brief lull between games as children caught their breath and parents checked their phones, Claudia approached Daniel with her signature smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "This is all so creative, Daniel," she said, her tone dripping with false admiration. "You've really made the most of your resources. I have to ask, though, where did you find that adorable little unicorn?" Daniel felt the trap in her question, the way she emphasized adorable and little, as if they were code words for something else. "The thrift store on Fifth Street," he replied evenly. "They had a whole selection of party supplies." "Oh, how resourceful!" Claudia exclaimed, a little too loudly, ensuring nearby parents could hear. "I just love when people can find hidden gems in unexpected places. It shows such ingenuity." The compliment felt like a backhanded slap. But before Daniel could respond, Sofia appeared at his side, tugging on his shirt with barely contained excitement. "Daddy," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "can we do cake time soon? I have something really special planned." Daniel looked down at his daughter's eager face and felt his heart skip a beat. There was something different in her expression, a determination that reminded him so much of Elena when she was preparing for one of her school concerts, a quiet confidence that suggested Sofia had been planning something bigger than he realized.
"Of course, mi amor," he said, kneeling down to her level, "whenever you're ready." Sofia's eyes sparkled with mischief and purpose as she glanced around at the gathered adults and children, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Actually," she announced with the kind of authority that only confident 10-year-olds possessed, "before we have cake, I have a surprise for everyone, especially for my daddy." The adults exchanged glances, their conversations forgotten in the face of Sofia's unexpected announcement. Even Claudia looked intrigued despite herself, her eyebrows raising with curiosity. "What kind of surprise, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, though something in his daughter's expression told him he should probably be prepared for anything. Sofia grinned, the kind of smile that could light up a room and make adults forget their worries. "You'll see," she said, bouncing on her toes. "But first, I need everyone to gather round while I get everything ready." As the gathering crowd created a semicircle around the small folding table where Mrs. Delgado carefully placed the homemade birthday cake, her weathered hands steady despite the weight of scrutinizing eyes from parents who were accustomed to three-tier fondant masterpieces from expensive bakeries. The cake was simple,
but beautiful. A single-layer chocolate creation with swirled buttercream frosting and 10 colorful candles arranged in a perfect circle. Daniel felt his throat tighten as he looked at the cake, remembering the hours Mrs. Delgado spent in his kitchen the night before, measuring ingredients with the precision of a chemist and humming old Mexican lullabies as she worked. The same songs Elena used to sing to Sofia when she was tiny and feverish. The cake represented so much more than dessert. It was love made tangible, sacrifice transformed into sweetness. Sofia stood beside the table, practically vibrating with excitement as the children pressed closer, their faces glowing in the warm afternoon light. But Daniel couldn't ignore the adult reactions happening behind the wall of eager young guests. He caught fragments of whispered conversations that made his stomach clench with familiar shame. "It's so small," one parent murmured to another, "probably from the grocery store bakery." Another voice added with false brightness, "Well, it's homemade. You can tell by the uneven frosting. How quaint." Claudia stepped forward with her camera phone raised, her voice cutting through the children's chatter with practiced authority. "This is such a precious moment," she declared, positioning herself for the perfect photo angle. "Sofia, darling, where did your father find this adorable little cake?" The emphasis on little and adorable felt like needles under Daniel's skin. But before he could respond, Sofia piped up with innocent pride. "Mrs. Delgado made it from scratch," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "She used my mama's recipe, the one for chocolate cake with vanilla buttercream. My mama used to make it for my birthday every year before she went to heaven." The sudden mention of Elena created a moment of hushed silence that even the most insensitive parents couldn't ignore. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion as memories flooded back. Elena standing in their tiny kitchen, covered in flour, and laughing as Sofia tried to help measure ingredients. The two of them singing off-key while the mixer whirred. The way Elena's face would light up when Sofia took that first perfect bite. Mrs. Delgado stepped forward, her eyes glistening as she placed a protective hand on Sofia's shoulder. "Your mama taught me that recipe, mija," she said softly, "and every year we make it together to remember how much she loved your birthday." Several parents shifted uncomfortably, their earlier criticism dying in their throats as they realized they had been mocking something sacred. But Claudia recovered quickly, her social training kicking in as she arranged her face into an expression of exaggerated sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed, "that's absolutely precious. I'm sure it tastes just like your mother made it, even if it doesn't look quite as professional." The backhanded compliment hung in the air like smoke, but Sofia seemed immune to its poison, her focus entirely on the ritual of lighting candles and making wishes. Daniel struck a match, his hands trembling slightly as he lit each candle, watching the tiny flames dance in the gentle breeze. "Make a wish, mi amor," he whispered, as Sofia closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched in concentration. When she opened her eyes and blew out the candles in one breath, the children erupted in cheers and applause. But Daniel noticed that Sofia's gaze immediately sought his face, searching for something he couldn't quite identify.
As he began cutting slices of cake, Daniel's hands shook more than he would have liked, the knife creating uneven portions that only emphasized the amateur nature of their celebration. He could feel judgment radiating from the cluster of parents behind him, their silence somehow more damning than their earlier whispers. The cake itself was perfect, moist and rich with the deep chocolate flavor that Elena had perfected over years of experimentation. But Daniel found himself apologizing as he handed out plates. "Sorry, the pieces aren't very even," he mumbled to the first parent who accepted a slice. "Nonsense," Mrs. Delgado interrupted sharply, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived through real hardship. "This cake is made with love, and that's something you can't buy in any fancy bakery." But the damage was done. Daniel could see it in the way some parents accepted their slices with forced smiles, in the way others declined politely, claiming dietary restrictions that materialized conveniently when faced with homemade food, in the way Claudia photographed her untouched slice as if it were a museum artifact rather than something meant to be eaten. Sofia seemed to sense the shift in mood, her earlier excitement dimming as she watched the adults' reactions to something that meant so much to her and Daniel. Daniel felt his heart break a little more with each polite but cold response. That's when he noticed Sofia slipping away from the group, her slice of cake abandoned on the table as she headed toward the house with purposeful steps that suggested whatever surprise she had planned was about to begin. Ethan noticed too and followed her quietly, his own piece of cake finished with obvious enjoyment, despite his mother's disapproving glare when she caught him licking frosting from his fingers. "Where are you going, Sofia?" he whispered as they reached the back door. Sofia turned back with a smile that held more determination than any 10-year-old should need to muster. "To show everyone what really matters," she replied, and something in her voice made Daniel's pulse quicken with anticipation and concern. As Sofia disappeared into the house, Daniel found himself surrounded by parents who were making their excuses, checking their watches and phones with the practiced efficiency of people who had fulfilled their social obligations and were ready to move on to more entertaining activities. "We should probably head out soon," one mother said to Claudia. "Our tennis lesson is at 3. Claudia nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the house where Sofia had vanished, her curiosity clearly piqued by the promise of whatever surprise awaited. Just then, the old speaker system crackled to life, filling the backyard with feedback that made everyone wince and look toward the back porch, where Sofia's small figure appeared silhouetted in the doorway. Before anyone could process what was happening, Sofia's voice echoed across the yard, clear and confident as she spoke into a small microphone that Daniel recognized with a jolt of surprise as the headset he had used years ago when he still thought he might become a music teacher. "Excuse me, everyone," she announced, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "I have something special to share before the party ends." The skeptical murmurs died away as guests turned their attention toward this unexpected development, and Daniel felt his world shift on its axis as he realized his daughter was about to change everything. Sofia stood in the doorway of the house, her small figure backlit by the warm light spilling from inside, but there was nothing small about her presence as she surveyed the gathered crowd with the confidence of someone who had been planning this moment for weeks. Her dark eyes met her father's across the yard, and Daniel saw something there that made his breath catch, a determination that reminded him so powerfully of Elena that for a moment he felt like his late wife was standing right beside him. "I need everyone to wait right here," Sofia announced, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone headset that brought back a flood of memories for Daniel. Memories of the music lessons he used to give in their living room before life became about surviving instead of thriving. "But I promise it will be worth it." She disappeared back into the house, leaving the guests murmuring among themselves, some with genuine curiosity, others with the indulgent patience that adults reserve for children's performances. Claudia checked her watch with obvious irritation, but even she seemed intrigued by Sofia's unexpected confidence. Inside the house, Sofia moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times. She carefully wheeled out her mother's old keyboard, the one that Daniel had been unable to bring himself to sell even when money was tightest, the instrument that had sat silent in their living room for 3 years, gathering dust and memories. Behind her, Ethan appeared, having slipped away from the adult gathering with the stealth of a child who had learned to move unnoticed through his own elaborate parties. "Can I help?" he whispered, his eyes wide with admiration for Sofia's boldness. Sofia smiled, grateful for his quiet support. "Help me carry this outside, and then can you make sure the laptop is connected to the speakers? My dad showed me how, but I want to make sure it works."
Together, they maneuvered the keyboard through the narrow doorway, Sofia's determination infectious as Ethan found himself caught up in her excitement. He had been to dozens of parties with professional entertainers and elaborate themes, but nothing had felt as genuine as this moment, watching Sofia prepare something clearly meaningful. Mrs. Delgado appeared in the kitchen doorway, her weathered face glowing with pride and understanding as she watched Sofia arrange her surprise. "Your mama would be so proud, mija," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Sofia paused in her preparations, her hands resting on the keyboard keys that had once filled their house with music. "I hope Daddy will be proud too," she said quietly. "I've been practicing for weeks, but I've never performed in front of so many people." Mrs. Delgado knelt beside her, placing gentle hands on Sofia's shoulders. "Mija, your daddy has been proud of you since the moment you were born, and after today, everyone else will understand why." Outside, the gathered parents were growing restless, their polite patience wearing thin as they waited for whatever childhood performance Sofia had planned. Daniel found himself torn between worry and anticipation, knowing his daughter well enough to sense that something significant was about to happen, but unable to predict what form it would take. Back inside, Sofia powered on the old laptop that had been her mother's, connecting it to the speaker system with cables that Ethan helped untangle. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising skill, testing the connection as soft notes drifted through the speakers. The slideshow was already loaded, photos that Sofia had carefully selected from the hundreds stored on her mother's computer, pictures that told the story of their small family's love in vivid detail. Daniel teaching Sofia to ride her bike in their narrow driveway, the two of them covered in flour after a failed attempt at pancakes. Sofia's first day of school with Daniel kneeling beside her, adjusting her backpack straps with infinite care. There were older photos too, ones that Sofia had found buried in digital folders. Elena holding newborn Sofia in the hospital, her face glowing with exhaustion and joy. The three of them at the park, Sofia tiny between their parents as they pushed her on swings. Elena and Daniel dancing in their living room, Sofia giggling from her high chair. Each image had been chosen deliberately to show not wealth or luxury, but something more valuable, the countless small moments that make up a life of love, the bedtime stories and scrape-knee kisses, the homework help and morning pancakes, the way Daniel's face lit up whenever Sofia learned something new. Sofia took a deep breath and tested the microphone one final time, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke to herself. "For Mama and for Daddy," she said, the words a prayer and a promise. Outside, Daniel felt his anxiety spike as the delay stretched on, but Mrs. Delgado caught his eye and nodded toward the house with a knowing smile that suggested she understood exactly what was about to unfold. Ethan returned to the backyard alone, his face flush with excitement as he rejoined the group of restless guests. When his mother demanded to know what was taking so long, he simply smiled and said, "Sofia's about to show everyone something amazing." The old speakers crackled once more, and Sofia's voice emerged clear and strong, cutting through the afternoon air with startling authority. "Thank you, everyone, for being here today," she said, her words carrying across the yard with the confidence of someone who had found her purpose. "This party means everything to me, not because of decorations or games, but because of the people I love." Daniel felt his heart begin to race as he realized that whatever was coming would change everything, that his daughter was about to step into her own power in a way that would leave no doubt about who she was or what she was worth. The first notes of music began to float through the speakers, soft and familiar, and Daniel's world tilted as he recognized the melody. Elena's melody, the song his late wife had written for Sofia's first birthday, the one she used to hum while rocking her daughter to sleep. And then Sofia began to sing, her voice pure and strong, carrying across the backyard like a prayer, like a gift, like everything beautiful that had ever existed distilled into sound. The first image appeared on the makeshift screen Sofia had created by stretching a white bedsheet between two oak trees, and suddenly the entire backyard fell into absolute silence. The photo showed Daniel from 3 years ago, kneeling beside toddler Sofia as he taught her to tie her shoes, his face patient and loving despite the early morning hour captured in the golden light streaming through their living room window. Sofia's voice rose above the gentle piano melody, her mother's song transformed by a child's pure emotion as she sang about love that doesn't need fancy things, about hands that work hard and hearts that never quit. The lyrics were simple but profound, each word chosen by Elena to celebrate the everyday heroism of parents who give everything they have. The slideshow continued, and with each new image the story unfolded like a love letter written in moments. Daniel carrying Sofia on his shoulders through the park, both of them laughing at some shared joke the camera had caught. them building a blanket fort in their tiny living room, Sofia's face glowing with delight as she handed Daniel pillows to complete their masterpiece. Daniel felt his throat tighten as memories flooded back, moments he had forgotten in the daily struggle to keep their heads above water. The way Sofia used to wake him up on Saturday mornings by singing off-key versions of her mother's songs. The elaborate tea parties she would set up using mismatched cups and crackers for cookies. The way she would sit in his lap while he paid bills, asking if she could help count the numbers. But the photos that hit hardest were the ones from the repair shop, images Sofia must have taken secretly during her after-school visits. Daniel hunched over an engine, his hands black with grease, but his face lighting up when he noticed Sofia watching him work. Sofia herself sitting at the small desk in the corner doing homework, while surrounded by the honest smell of motor oil and hard work.
The parents who had been checking their phones and shifting restlessly were now completely still, their earlier conversations forgotten as they watched this intimate portrait of a family's love unfold before them. Even Claudia had lowered her camera, her usual performance of documenting everything for social media abandoned in the face of something too real to be reduced to a photo opportunity. Sofia's voice grew stronger as she reached the chorus, her small hands moving confidently across the keyboard keys as she sang about the man who fixes everything that's broken, including hearts that feel too heavy to carry. The melody soared and dipped, carrying 3 years of grief and healing, 3 years of a father learning to be both parents, 3 years of a daughter growing up too fast but never losing her capacity for joy. The slideshow showed Daniel at Sofia's school events, sitting alone in auditoriums full of couples, his attention completely focused on his daughter as she performed in school plays or received academic awards. His pride radiating from every photo, even when he was clearly exhausted from working double shifts to afford the costumes or supplies she needed. Then came the photos that made several parents gasp audibly. Images of Daniel teaching Sofia to play guitar on Elena's old instrument, showing her how to read music using the same patient methods Elena had used. The two of them at the kitchen table with sheet music spread between breakfast dishes. Daniel's calloused mechanic's hands gently guiding Sofia's small fingers to find the right chords. Mrs. Delgado wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the guests realize what they were witnessing. Not just a performance, but a testimony. A 10-year-old girl's declaration of love for a father who had never stopped believing in her, even when the world made him feel like he wasn't enough. The music shifted to a bridge that Elena had written specifically about dreams deferred but not destroyed, and Sofia's voice carried new weight as she sang about how sometimes the most beautiful things grow in unexpected places, how love can bloom in small houses with tight budgets, how a father's sacrifice is the most precious gift a child can receive. More photos flashed across the screen, Daniel reading bedtime stories by lamplight, both of them building model airplanes at the kitchen table, Sofia learning to cook simple meals so she could help when Daniel worked late, the two of them painting Sofia's bedroom wall bright purple because she had always wanted a princess room and Daniel had figured out how to make it happen with discount paint and weekend labor.
Even the children were transfixed by the slideshow, recognizing their classmate in these intimate family moments, but seeing her in an entirely new light. Sofia, the girl who always shared her lunch with kids who forgot theirs. Sofia, who helped struggling classmates with homework. Sofia, who never complained about her secondhand clothes or homemade lunches, suddenly made perfect sense. The final verse approached, and Sofia's eyes found her father's across the crowd of silent guests, her voice breaking slightly with emotion as she sang the words Elena had written, for moments exactly like this, when love needs to declare itself loudly enough for the whole world to hear, when a child needs to tell her father that he is enough, that he has always been enough, that she wouldn't trade their small, beautiful life for anything the world could offer. As the last notes faded into the afternoon air, the backyard remained silent, except for the sound of wind rustling through leaves and the distant hum of traffic on streets that suddenly felt very far away. Sofia stood beside the keyboard, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths, her dark eyes still locked on her father's face.
The makeshift screen displayed the final image. Sofia and Daniel, from just last week, sitting on their front porch, sharing a bowl of ice cream and laughing at something only they found funny. Two people who had learned to be a complete family, despite the empty space that would always exist where Elena should have been. Daniel felt something break open in his chest. Not sadness, but a fierce pride that threatened to overwhelm him. His daughter had just shown everyone who had ever doubted them exactly what their love looked like, exactly what their life meant, exactly why he would never apologize for being the father who gave everything, even when everything felt like not enough. The silence stretched on, pregnant with possibility and transformation, until finally someone began to clap. The applause started with Mrs. Delgado, her weathered hands coming together with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who understood the profound weight of what they had just witnessed. But the sound grew quickly, spreading through the crowd like ripples across still water, as one by one, the guests found themselves clapping, not with polite obligation, but with genuine emotion. Daniel watched in amazement as parents who had spent the entire party whispering about his modest decorations and homemade refreshments now stood with tears in their eyes, their earlier judgments crumbling in the face of Sofia's raw honesty. Several mothers pressed tissues to their cheeks, their makeup smudged by unexpected emotion, while fathers cleared their throats and looked away, trying to compose themselves.
Even some of the children were crying, though they didn't fully understand why. Isabella wiped her nose on her dress sleeve as she ran to hug Sofia tightly, whispering, "That was the most beautiful song I ever heard," while other classmates crowded around with the kind of awe usually reserved for celebrities or superheroes. But it was Ethan's reaction that surprised everyone most. The quiet boy, who usually faded into the background, stepped forward with tears streaming down his face, his voice clear and strong as he spoke directly to Sofia. "That was better than any party I've ever been to," he said, his words carrying across the now silent yard. "Sofia, you're the bravest person I know." His declaration broke something open in the crowd, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Parents who had arrived with prepared judgments now found themselves genuinely praising Daniel's parenting, offering heartfelt compliments about Sofia's talent and character, asking questions about the songs and photos with authentic interest rather than polite obligation. "I had no idea Sofia was so musically gifted," one mother said to Daniel, her voice thick with emotion. "You must be so proud." Another parent stepped forward, his business card already in hand. "I run a small recording studio downtown, and I would love to talk to you about getting Sofia some proper voice training if she's interested." The offers kept coming, parents volunteering to help with music lessons, suggesting Sofia audition for the school's advanced choir, sharing stories of their own children's talents that had been nurtured through community support and encouragement. Daniel felt overwhelmed by the sudden shift from judgment to genuine community support. Mrs. Delgado stood beside him, beaming with vindicated pride as she watched the transformation unfold around them, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction as parents who had dismissed Daniel's efforts now competed to offer assistance and praise. But not everyone was transformed by Sofia's performance. Claudia Harper stood frozen near the refreshment table, her face cycling through emotions too complex to name. Surprise, embarrassment, anger, and something that might have been genuine remorse battled for control of her expression as she watched her social circle completely reverse their opinions about the Reyes family. Several parents approached Claudia directly, their voices carrying the kind of quiet reproach that cut deeper than any shouting match. "I think we owe this family an apology," one father said quietly, his eyes never leaving Claudia's face. "We've spent the whole party criticizing someone who's doing an incredible job as a single parent." Another mother nodded in agreement, adding, "That little girl has more grace and maturity than most adults I know, including myself." Claudia's carefully constructed social authority crumbled as the group that had followed her lead in mocking the party now looked at her with disappointment and barely concealed disgust.
Her phone buzzed with what she assumed were the usual social media notifications, but when she glanced down, she saw that several parents had already posted videos of Sofia's performance online, with captions praising Daniel's parenting and Sofia's incredible talent. The viral potential of the moment wasn't lost on Claudia, who understood better than anyone how quickly public opinion could shift in the age of social media. But this time she found herself on the wrong side of the narrative. The woman who had mocked a grieving widower and his talented daughter at a birthday party that had more heart than any country club celebration. Sofia, meanwhile, seemed almost surprised by the intensity of the response. Her cheeks flushed with pleasure as she accepted hugs and compliments from classmates and adults alike, but her eyes kept finding her father's face, searching for the approval that mattered most to her. Daniel made his way through the crowd, accepting handshakes and emotional compliments with the gracious humility that had always defined him. But when he finally reached Sofia, he knelt down and pulled her into a hug that conveyed everything words couldn't. "He's so proud of you, mi amor," he whispered against her hair. "Not just for the song, but for your courage, for standing up for our family, for showing everyone what really matters." Sofia pulled back to look at him, her dark eyes shining with unshed tears. "Did I do good, Daddy?" she asked. The question every child asks when they've poured their heart into something bigger than themselves. "You did perfect," he replied, his voice breaking slightly. "You did exactly what Mama would have done." The mention of Elena created another wave of emotion as parents realized they had been witnessing not just a performance, but a continuation of a love story that transcended death, a mother's songs living on through her daughter's voice, a father's devotion creating the foundation for a child's confidence. As the crowd began to settle into a new dynamic of genuine appreciation and community support, Claudia Harper quietly gathered her purse and began moving toward the gate, her earlier bravado replaced by the uncomfortable awareness that she had been publicly exposed as someone whose values were fundamentally misplaced. But before she could escape completely, Sofia's voice rang out across the yard one final time. "Mrs. Harper," she called out, her tone polite but firm. "Wait, please."
Every eye turned toward the confrontation that was about to unfold, and even Claudia found herself stopping, despite her obvious desire to flee the scene of her social humiliation. Sofia walked across the yard with the confident stride of someone who had just discovered her own power, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of every adult and child present as she approached Claudia Harper, who stood frozen by the back gate like a deer caught in headlights, her usual social armor cracked and failing. "Mrs. Harper," Sofia said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent backyard, "I wanted to thank you for coming to my party today and for bringing Ethan." Claudia's face flushed with confusion and embarrassment as she struggled to process Sofia's unexpected graciousness. After everything that had transpired, the polite thanks felt like the most devastating response possible, more cutting than any accusation or angry confrontation. "I also wanted to tell you something," Sofia continued, her dark eyes meeting Claudia's directly with the kind of steady gaze that suggested wisdom far beyond her 10 years. "My daddy taught me that when people say mean things, it's usually because they're hurting inside, and I hope whatever is making you hurt gets better soon." The words landed like gentle bombs in the stunned silence that followed. Several parents exchanged glances that mixed admiration for Sofia's maturity with barely concealed shock at her ability to extend grace to someone who had shown her family none. Claudia's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged, her carefully constructed social persona completely dismantled by a child's unexpected mercy. She looked around the yard at faces that had once followed her lead in judgment, now staring at her with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. But Sofia wasn't finished. She turned to address the entire gathering, her voice growing stronger as she spoke from the heart about the things that mattered most to her. "I want everyone to know something about my daddy," she announced, her small hands clasped in front of her. "He works so hard every day, not just at his job, but to make sure I know I'm loved. He helps me with homework, even when he's tired. He makes me breakfast every morning, even when we're running late. He comes to every school event, even when it means losing money from work. Her voice caught slightly as emotion threatened to overwhelm her, but she pressed on, determined to finish what she had started. He taught me to play music because Mama loved music, and he wanted me to have that connection to her. He reads me stories every night because Mama used to do that, and he doesn't want me to lose those memories. He works extra hours so I can have new shoes and school supplies and birthday parties. The crowd listened in absolute silence as Sofia painted a picture of daily heroism that made their earlier criticisms seem petty and cruel. Her words created a stark contrast between their obsession with appearances and the reality of genuine love in action. But most importantly, Sofia continued, her voice now strong and unwavering, he never makes me feel like we don't have enough because he shows me every day that love is enough, that trying your best is enough, that being together is enough. She paused to wipe her eyes before delivering her final statement, the words that would echo in every parent's mind long after they left the party. Some people think you need money to show love, but my daddy shows me love in a million ways every day, and that's worth more than anything you can buy in any store anywhere in the world. The silence that followed was profound and transformative. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face as he realized his daughter had just articulated everything he had hoped she understood but had been afraid to ask her about, the values he had tried to instill through his actions rather than his words. Mrs. Delgado stepped forward, her own eyes glistening as she placed a proud hand on Sofia's shoulder. "Your mama would be so proud, mija," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "not just of your music, but of your heart." One by one, parents began approaching Daniel with genuine apologies for their earlier behavior, their voices thick with emotion as they acknowledged how wrong they had been to judge his parenting or Sofia's party. Several offered specific help with music lessons, car repairs, babysitting, and other forms of community support. Even some of the fathers who had remained silent during the earlier whispered criticisms now stepped forward to shake Daniel's hand and express their admiration for his dedication as a single parent, their respect evident in their firm grips and direct eye contact. The children, meanwhile, had processed the adult drama in their own way, clustering around Sofia with the fierce loyalty that kids show when one of their own has been threatened. Several announced their intention to have their next birthday parties in backyards with homemade decorations and simple games inspired by the genuine fun they had experienced.
Ethan lingered near Sofia, his earlier shyness completely abandoned as he spoke with quiet intensity. "I wish my dad cared about me the way your dad cares about you," he said, his words carrying the weight of a child who had recognized something precious in someone else's family. Sofia hugged him tightly, her natural empathy extending to this boy who had supported her when she needed it most. "Your parents love you too," she assured him. "They just show it differently. Maybe you can teach them some of the things my daddy taught me." As the afternoon sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting golden light across the transformed backyard, parents began the process of leaving, but the departure felt completely different from the rushed escape they had been planning earlier. Now they lingered, chatting with Daniel about music and parenting, sharing contact information, and making plans for future gatherings. Claudia Harper left without another word, her earlier social dominance completely evaporated as she found herself abandoned by the very people who had once followed her lead in judgment. Her expensive SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying someone who had learned too late the difference between influence and respect. The last guests filtered out, carrying pieces of leftover cake and memories of a party that had started as an obligation and ended as a revelation about what really matters in family and community. Until finally, only the Reyes family and Mrs. Delgado remained in the backyard that had been transformed not by decorations, but by love made visible. Sofia sat on her father's lap in one of the borrowed chairs, her head resting against his chest as they watched the string lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The keyboard and laptop were still set up nearby, like instruments of revolution that had changed everything with the power of truth and music. "Today was perfect, Daddy," Sofia murmured, her voice heavy with exhaustion and satisfaction. "It was perfect because of you, mi amor," he replied, "and because you showed everyone, including me, what we're really worth." Mrs. Delgado smiled as she began collecting empty plates and cups, her movements efficient but unhurried, as she savored the aftermath of a day that had proven love will always triumph over judgment when given the chance to speak its truth. The evening air was soft and warm as Daniel and Sofia sat together on their front porch swing, the same swing he had rebuilt 3 times over the years, because it was Sofia's favorite place to think and dream and watch the world go by. The string lights he had hung for the party cast a gentle glow across their small yard, transforming the modest space into something magical that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. Sofia curled against her father's side, her party dress wrinkled from a day of games and hugs, and the kind of joy that leaves physical evidence on everything it touches. In her lap sat a plate with the last piece of Mrs. Delgado's cake, which they had been sharing in comfortable silence as the neighborhood settled in to its evening rhythm. The laptop was still open beside them, displaying the slideshow that had changed everything. The photos cycling through memories that told the story of their life together, each image a testament to the truth Sofia had proclaimed so boldly that afternoon, that love shows itself in countless small ways every single day. "Daddy," Sofia said quietly, her voice thoughtful in the way that meant she was processing something important. "Were you scared when I got up to sing today?" Daniel considered the question carefully, knowing that his daughter deserved honesty, not platitudes wrapped in parental protection. "A little," he admitted, his arm tightening around her shoulders, "but not because I thought you couldn't do it. I was scared because I knew you could, and I knew that meant you were growing up, becoming the strong, confident person you were always meant to be." Sofia smiled against his chest, her understanding of adult emotions sometimes startling in its accuracy. "I was scared too," she confessed, "but then I remembered what you always tell me, that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the right thing even when you are afraid." The wisdom in her words made Daniel's heart clench with pride and a bittersweet awareness that his little girl was indeed growing up faster than he sometimes felt ready for. But today had proven that all the lessons he had tried to teach through example had taken root in ways that would serve her throughout her life. Mrs. Delgado appeared from around the side of the house, carrying a thermos of hot chocolate and 3 mismatched mugs, her timing perfect as always, her face glowing with the satisfaction of someone who had witnessed justice served with grace and music. "I thought you two might like something warm," she said, settling into the old wicker chair that Daniel had rescued from a garage sale and painted bright yellow because Sofia had declared it looked like sunshine. As they sipped the rich chocolate and watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, Daniel found himself thinking about the phone calls that had already started coming in. Parents offering music lessons and tutoring, and playdates that were motivated by genuine friendship rather than social obligation. The recording studio owner had called twice, leaving increasingly enthusiastic voicemails about Sofia's potential and his desire to help nurture her talent. The school principal had reached out after seeing the videos that parents had posted online, expressing interest in having Sofia perform at the upcoming fall festival. But perhaps most surprisingly, 3 different parents had asked Daniel if he would consider teaching their children basic auto repair skills after learning about his patient teaching methods with Sofia. The idea of expanding beyond his small shop to include educational workshops felt like a dream he had forgotten he was allowed to have. "Sofia, your mama would be so proud of you today," Mrs. Delgado said, her voice soft with emotion. "Not just for your beautiful singing, but for your courage in standing up for your family." Sofia nodded solemnly, her dark eyes reflecting the string lights as she considered Mrs. Delgado's words. "I felt like she was there with me," she said simply,
like she was helping me remember the words and the music and how to be brave. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes as he realized that his daughter had found a way to connect with Elena's memory that was healthy and empowering, rather than painful and limiting. The songs that had once represented loss were now becoming bridges to strength and self-confidence. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening routines, lights coming on in windows, families gathering for dinner, children being called inside for baths and bedtime stories. The ordinary magic of community life that Daniel had sometimes felt excluded from, but now felt genuinely part of. A car pulled up to the curb and Ethan Harper climbed out, followed by his father, who approached the porch with the hesitant steps of someone seeking permission to intrude on a peaceful moment. "I hope we're not bothering you," Mr. Harper said, his voice carrying genuine respect that had been absent from earlier interactions, but Ethan insisted on coming back to thank Sofia properly. Ethan stepped forward, his earlier shyness replaced by the kind of determined friendship that forms when children recognize kindness in each other. "Sofia," he said, his young voice serious, "I wanted to tell you that today was the best party I've ever been to, not because of games or decorations, but because you showed me what a real family looks like." The boy's honesty created another moment of profound emotion, as his father placed a protective hand on his shoulder, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My son is right, Mr. Reyes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today you showed all of us what really matters in parenting and in life. I hope you'll accept my apology for our earlier behavior." Daniel stood and extended his hand, accepting the apology with the grace that had defined his response to every challenge the day had brought. "We all do our best with what we have," he said simply, "and today reminded me that what we have is enough." As the Harpers left with promises of future playdates and genuine friendship, Sofia turned to her father with a question that had been building all day. "Daddy, do you think we could start having music nights again like Mama used to do, where we play songs and sing together?" Daniel felt his heart expand with possibility as he realized that his daughter was ready to reclaim joy rather than just remember loss. "I think Mama would love that, mi amor," he said, his voice warm with anticipation. "We can start with the songs she wrote and maybe even write some new ones together." Sofia's face lit up with excitement as she began planning their musical future, chattering about lyrics and melodies and the keyboard that would no longer sit silent in their living room, but would once again fill their small house with the sound of love made audible. Mrs. Delgado gathered the empty mugs with a satisfied smile, her work as fairy godmother complete for the evening, but her presence in their lives a permanent blessing that made their family stronger and more complete. As Sofia yawned and leaned more heavily against her father's side, Daniel reflected on the day's transformation from shame to pride, from isolation to community, from doubt to absolute certainty that love expressed through daily action is indeed worth more than anything money can buy. The slideshow continued to cycle through their memories, but now each photo looked different to Daniel, not like evidence of what they lacked, but like proof of what they had built together, a foundation of love that could withstand any judgment and support any dream. "Your mama would be so proud," he whispered as Sofia's breathing deepened toward sleep, "not just for your performance today, but for the woman you're becoming." And as the stars grew brighter above their small, perfect world, Daniel knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight was for contentment, for the quiet satisfaction of a father who had raised a daughter brave enough to change hearts with the power of truth and music and love. The porch swing creaked gently in the evening breeze, carrying them toward dreams filled with melodies and memories and the promise of many more perfect, imperfect, beautiful days ahead. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.